Hello and welcome to my presentation on dietary effects on cardiovascular disease by Andrea Herron. I do want to apologize in advance. I am suffering from an upper respiratory infection that's pretty severe and has had me down and out for the last several days. So I might be coughing a little bit throughout this presentation, and I apologize. So let's get started. This is the anatomy of a heart. We have the arteries with our blood flow. Sometimes those arteries can be blocked with a blood clot. And also, as we can see, that yellow plaque in there, that's our cholesterol that can build up in the artery walls and create a blockage as well. I sometimes like to refer to it as going from a 4-lane highway down to 1 lane, and that becomes a severe blockage. And this is where a stent will be added in to help open that artery back up. And we can have a dying muscle. This is usually where there's been a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, basically, and it has damaged some of the muscle. And so that, of course, weakens its ability. So some types of heart disease, we have coronary artery disease, kind of one of the most common. It's fatty deposits, it's wonderful cholesterol, triglycerides that like to hang out in our arteries and block the blood flow. And then we have a valve disease. This is where the valves that are opening and closing continually to open the blood flow and release the blood flow sometimes get a little lazy, sometimes as they call it, or it just isn't properly opening and closing correctly. So that's valve disease. Aneurysm is where we have the thoracic aortic aneurysm, where it is a blood clot basically getting in there. A cardiac arrhythmia, this is where the electrical signals that are constantly pumping our heart are disorganized, throwing kind of the whole system out of whack. Cardiomyopathy, this is thickening of the myocardium. And as we can see, what it does is it distorts one side of the heart. It will distort either the right or the left chamber, and this, of course, has a snowball effect, and the heart's not able to pump properly, and we can get some what we call low ejection fracture out of the arteries. Pericarditis, inflamed pericardium, and this is something very common. We have inflammation that's doing something similar to this cardiomyopathy. The cardiomyopathy is the thickening of the walls, and inflammation is just that. It's inflammation, but it's pushing in on the interior of the heart, again, creating it to have to find another path or have to work harder, etc. So they have a blood test for this called CRP, which measures your inflammation, and the higher the number, the higher inflammation is in the body, and that can be, a distinguishing factor of what's happening. We have heart failure as the last one, and this is where you have a dilated ventricle. Sometimes it's too dilated meaning open, and therefore the ejection fracture it is low. So I have had patients down to 15% ejection fracture, which is very low. Typically, we want them to be about 45 to 60 as an ejection fracture, and that ejection fracture is how fast that blood is flowing in and out of the heart. That's what it really comes down to. So when it comes to a heart healthy diet, getting enough sleep is absolutely vital. The American Heart Association recommends 7 to 9 hours sleep per night. It helps rest and restore and repair our bodies. Don't drink too much alcohol. Exercise more. Don't smoke cigarettes or tobacco. Enjoy a healthy diet. and reduce your stress. And the stress less and the exercise more can really go hand in hand. Exercise has been shown to help reduce stress. You can also do exercises such as yoga or meditation. That can be vital to reducing your stress. Talking with a therapist is a great way. Many of my patients who've had a cardiac event, whether it be a bypass, a stent, um, a TAVR and AVR where they have fixed that valve, or an aneurysm, anything, all these different things. The event was so stressful because it was so life-changing, and we often say to them, it is very beneficial to reach out and find a therapist and do talk therapy for a little while to help you get over the anxiety and stress that came from that event. So cardiovascular disease risk factors, these are some, but not all. Obesity, hypertension, which is elevated high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, your cholesterol is high, diabetes type 1 and 2, and that is because the diabetes does have a dramatic effect on all of our working organs within the body, and so they do eventually create some havoc with our heart as well, and they can weaken the heart. Diet, physical inactivity, smoking, or even secondhand smoke, alcohol, and then family history and genetics. Those are some things that can't really be changed. Our age is another one, and so there's a few things that we're unable to modify, but there are several things that we can modify to help reduce these risk factors. So first, you want to know, what is your lipid panel? This is your cholesterol, triglycerides, etc. So total cholesterol, the number should be less than 200. Triglycerides should be less than 150. The HDL, high density lipoprotein, that is actually the good cholesterol, and that should be above 40. There has been some studies that have come out showing that they don't want the number to be any higher than 90. I rarely have ever seen a patient having something in that high. I have seen one or two, but it's not. It's more of a rarity. LDL, that's our low density lipoprotein. This is the bad stuff. This is what we really want to keep low as possible, less than 100, but the lower the better on that. So let's look at what these fats are that go into making our cholesterol and triglycerides. Saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fats. I'm not talking about trans fats in this presentation because they are banned in the United States, and it was first started to be banned in the European Union, and then Canada followed along quickly after, and then we finally caught on. So very rarely will you ever see a trans fat. There are a few items naturally that have a little bit of trans fat in them, but it's still listed on our labels, food labels. The saturated fatty acid basically has no double bonds in it. As you can see, the white is the carbon and the yellow or orange is the hydrogen that's attached to each carbon. And then the monounsaturated has one double bond. So we can see here towards the right, there are two carbons that are double bonded together, and then they have a single bond of hydrogen. The polyunsaturated fat is basically greater than one double bond. So it could just be two. In this illustration, it's three. And that is all, of course, linked to a glycerol backbone that you can see over here to the right. So saturated fats, butter, ghee, lard, coconut oil, palm oil, cocoa butter, animal fat, and dairy. So I have had many patients ask me that they were under the impression ghee is healthier, and it is not. Ghee is simply melted butter, and they've taken out all of the milk fat in it, leaving that beautiful yellow color of the oil. You do have a higher smoke point when you're cooking with it, but other than that, there's no health benefit to it. Lard, of course, that would be animal lard, or what, good old Crisco. Coconut oil, palm oil, or sometimes it's known as palm kernel oil, and cocoa butter. These are our three tropical sources, tropical fruit sources of saturated fat. But most saturated fat comes from animal fat and dairy. So monounsaturated fat sources, these are just a few: olive, peanut, and canola oils. I'll give you my 2 cents on canola in a minute. Avocados are a great source of monounsaturated fat. And then nuts, such as almonds, hazelnuts, and pecans. Seeds, such as pumpkin and sesame seeds. The canola oils have a lot of controversy because it is a Canadian pharmaceutical or agricultural company that developed this and patented the name, hence CAN for Canada. It is genetically modified, and it has pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, all that in the plant. It's very controversial. The actual real name of what canola oil is called rapeseed oil, not grapeseed oil, rapeseed oil, which is, I think, why they wanted to change the name to canola. But you still can find rapeseed oil online. I purchased some from Ireland via Amazon, and it is amazing. I call it liquid gold. It is gorgeous. It comes from a flower. The rapeseed flower is very similar to the mustard flower, so it has this little yellow flower, and really delicious. I highly recommend you seek that out if you can. So next we have our polyunsaturated fats, and we have sunflower, corn, soybean, and flaxseed oils are good sources of polyunsaturated fats. Walnuts are definitely an excellent source, the highest source of omega-3 found in walnuts. Pistachios do have a little bit, pecans do, and as well as pine nuts do as well. Flax seeds are another great addition for a polyunsaturated fat, as well as chia seeds and hemp seeds. And then, of course, fish. Some more than others. Salmon, of course, Pacific salmon preferably, or Alaskan salmon as it's also known as. Tuna, you can certainly do tuna in the can, just make sure it's low sodium and packed in water. And that canola oil, here it pops up again. Although it's higher in monounsaturated fat, it's also a good source of polyunsaturated fat. So omega-3 fats are an important type of polyunsaturated fat, and the body can't make these, so they must come from food. An excellent source of a way of getting omega-3 fats is by eating fish, at least 2 to 3 times a week, and certainly nothing deep fried. So baked or steamed, poached, things like that. Are some good options. Plant sources actually have a good source of omega-3, and since I went past my little slide there, I will just tell you that, again, chia seeds, hemp seeds, and flax seeds are an excellent source of omega-3. And then also your avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, sunflower seed oil, things like that are good options as well. And even things such as our berries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, they actually have some omega-3 in them. Mango when I was doing my research, mango has 5% of your daily recommended intake of omega-3. Some other good options are oatmeal, oats, about 10% of your daily recommended intake. Wild rice, another good one, also about 10% of your recommended daily intake, and a half a cup of wild rice. Soy is a good option, and then there are a few other fruits and vegetables that also have omega-3 in them. So tips for a healthy heart, sorry, my brain is a little fried. Reduce stress, that is a big one. And again, like I mentioned before, so many people are in denial that they have any stress. Drink less alcohol. 7 drinks a week for men, 4 drinks a week for women is the recommendation. Ditch the salt. Salt is the biggest culprit here, and we'll get into that in a moment. Cutting the fat, getting rid of, even though there are healthy fats, we still don't want to, overdo it. So, for example, when I talk with my patients about walnuts, they are a good healthy fat. It doesn't mean you can have a whole bag of them in one sitting. I always recommend a 1/4 cup maximum per day, which is about what you can fit in the cup of your hand. And because fat equals calories. Get active, so exercise of some way. Lose weight, that always helps. Lower the blood pressure. So, of course, medications are going to come into play here, but some of the biggest ways we can lower our blood pressure naturally are exercising, both cardio and weight resistance. And we can do things like yoga and meditation. And then, of course, reducing the sodium and eating a proper diet. And then getting some good sleep. Sleep is recommended to be 7 to 9 hours a night by the American Heart Association. Pumping some iron, so there's that weight resistance to help ensure that we're not losing our muscle mass and that we are gaining or maintaining muscle mass. And stop smoking cigarettes or any tobacco, cigars included. So the Pritikin diet, Nathan Pritikin was an engineer, and he was diagnosed with cardiovascular disease back in the 60s, I believe it was, or early 70s. And he wrote a book in 1979 on his recommendation for a proper diet. 10% total fat. So all of this is coming based on whatever your daily caloric intake is. And we all know that, for a man of 6 foot tall compared to a 5'2" woman, your calorie intake should be different. So 10% total fat, and then 15% lean animal protein or plant protein, and then 75% complex carbohydrates. And again, some of these, and I'll get a little more into this because it may look a little odd, but typically we want to reduce that sodium intake to 1,215 milligrams daily, and have the animal protein be lean meats, and then only 1 per day animal protein, and the majority of your meals come from plant protein. And this is where that 75% complex carbs comes into play, because that's going to have a lot of your plant proteins. So generally, this is the recommendation. I work with Pritikin in the intensive cardiac rehab at my facility, and this is the recommendation. 5 servings, and a serving is just a half a cup. So 5 servings of whole grains, legumes, and starchy vegetables. Starchy vegetables can be peas, carrots, and potatoes, and winter squashes such as acorn or butternut squash. Whole grains can be anything from brown rice, wild rice, bulgur, quinoa, farro, all sorts of different things. Whole grain pastas, whole wheat pasta, for example. Whole grain bread. 1 slice of whole grain bread is one of your servings. Next, it's 5 half-cup servings of vegetables, unless you're doing a salad, a raw salad. Let's say you're doing a raw spinach salad, or just a general leaf salad, then it's 1 cup of serving of that. But 5 servings of vegetables, and eat the rainbow on this. 4 servings of fruit, and fruit is I often recommend it to my patients as being a part of their daily snack regimen, and to have fruit as a dessert. 2 calcium-rich foods. This does not have to be dairy, but it can be. If it is dairy, we want it to be low fat or no fat. And if you're choosing things like yogurts, you want to try to do Greek yogurt, non-fat, plain. And this is going to give you a little bit higher protein, no fat, and then no added sugars in there. You can add your own fruit, or let's say you have some date syrup that you want to put in there, or a little tiny bit of honey, something along the lines that you want to be in control of the sugar or the sweetness that's going into it. So we always recommend plain for the yogurt. Also, when it comes to calcium-rich foods, again, doesn't have to be dairy if you're not interested. If you're doing a non-dairy alternative, such as soy milk, hemp milk, oat milk, almond milk, those are going to be enriched with calcium. But think about our dark leafy greens, such as spinach, collard greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, kale, and then chia seeds are a great source of calcium. So calcium doesn't have to come from dairy. We want 1 source of animal protein daily. So that means if you're going to have, let's say salmon at dinner, then your lunch and your breakfast should not consist of animal protein. It should be a plant protein. So when we talk about animal protein, we preferably want fish, high in omega-3, white poultry meat with no skin, so that could be chicken or turkey, bison, venison, elk, or pork tenderloin. Those are all low-fat options for meat. But beef, sadly, I say stay away. And then if you're going to have eggs, preferably to have egg whites. So if you're going to do an egg white scramble or something like that, egg whites are the best because they offer the protein but no cholesterol from the yolks. So fiber and complex carbohydrates. Fiber is recommended 25 grams per day for women, 30 grams per day for men. The average American probably gets 10 grams or less, and that's because of our heavy reliance on processed foods and fast foods. We want to reduce added sugars, and of course, looking here on the nutrition facts label, we can see that they have now changed it. So instead of just saying, okay, total sugars, whatever, we now have total sugars 12 grams, for example, but that includes 10 grams of added sugars. So whatever this item is, it naturally had 2 grams of sugar, natural sugar in it. But then they added 10 grams of sugars that could be, something as simple as cane sugar, fruit juice, all sorts of, there's hundreds of different ways that the sugars can be added in there. So it's something we want to reduce. Typically, we want it to be less than 10% of your total daily value to calories. When you have heart issues, we usually say try to reduce that even lower. Alcohol and nicotine or tobacco, these are a biggie too. So limit alcohol intake to 4 servings a week for women and 7 servings a week for men, and abstain from tobacco intake. And try to avoid secondhand smoke as much as possible. So when we're going to go further in a slide here and talk about the Mediterranean diet, they are very vocal about having a glass of red wine every day. And there has been studies shown that resveratrol, which is a byproduct of the fermentation of the wine, has been known to be an antioxidant and help protect our cells. It's also considered a social de-stressor. So being social helps reduce your stress. We'll get into that in a little more. Hydration is a big one. And there is sometimes possible fluid restrictions based on the cardiologist. And sometimes they'll say 1,200 milliliters. Sometimes it'll be 1,500 milliliters. I've seen 1,800 milliliters and then 2,000 max liters, milliliters. So, but if you're not on a fluid restriction, then the typical way to calculate your hydration needs are you take your body weight, current body weight, divide it by 2. And this is going to give you your total ounces that you need for the day. To break it down a little easier, you'd then take that number, that total ounces number, and divide it by 8. And that's going to give you how many cups a day you should be drinking. One thing I like to preface, in my region, we are at 5,000 feet or higher. And so we require a little extra hydration. We're also in what's called a high desert, dry climate. So again, extra hydration. So I often tell my patients when I've calculated their number, let's say it said 10 cups of water per day. I always tell them to add 1 or 2 more cups to that just because of our location. The Bay Area, which is just 3 hours away, they are at sea level. They don't require the additional amount of water that we do in the high desert at a higher elevation. Also, many people think that coffee counts as their amount of hydration, and it does not. It actually counteracts it. So for every cup of coffee, you should replace with a glass of water. So the Mediterranean diet was done in the 1960s, and it was a study of 7 different countries in the Mediterranean region. And this has become a popular diet and is told by many physicians and scientists and dietitians that this is definitely the preferred way to eat. So red meat and sweets we want to enjoy sparingly, meaning not very often. Poultry, eggs, and dairy, enjoy 1 to 2 times a week. Fish, seafood, and omega-3 rich foods we want to have greater than 3 times a week. Whole grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, herbs and spices enjoy daily. And then here comes that physical activity and family time and meal time, mealing, sitting down with your family and having a good meal, taking time, slow down to eat. One of the classic problems that we have in the standard American diet is that we eat way too fast, which can cause overeating, etc. So take your time, be mindful, set aside meal time with family and friends, and daily physical activity. So these are the basics. So you want to emphasize fruits and vegetables, whole grains, healthy sources of proteins, fish and seafood. However, I do want to point out that crab and lobster and prawns or shrimp no more than once a week because they do have a high cholesterol amount in them. But shellfish like mussels and clams and oysters, perfectly acceptable. Legumes and nuts, some low-fat or fat-free dairy, poultry, and if desired, some lean meats. So again, lean meats would be bison, elk, venison. You can easily find those in the stores here in the West Coast. Not sure about back east. You want to do a lot of plant-based proteins, and then also choose liquid plant oils, soybean oil, canola oil, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, etc. So these are things that you want to emphasize. Things that you want to reduce are going to be sodas, your alcohol intake, fast food, heavy sugar desserts, pretzels, potato chips, things like that that aren't so healthy for you. Canned soup, which has a ton of sodium in it, and when you're searching for canned vegetables, make sure it's reduced sodium or low sodium. Adjust energy intake to achieve and maintain a healthy body weight. So portion size is definitely a big one. We all suffer from portion distortion, and so getting in line with what your portion size should be will help you maintain a healthy body weight. And follow this guidance regardless of where food is prepared and consumed. You just want to try to focus on whole foods rather than processed foods. So, with the heart healthy diet, we talked about physical activity, avoiding risky substances like alcohol and tobacco, and having a social connection. Having a social connection is, especially as we age, is very important for our health. If you are isolated and lonely, that's only going to lead to stress. And social connection with the Mediterranean diet is enjoying a glass of wine with your friends, in the evening or in the afternoon, whatever case may be. But just one glass, and red wine is preferred. And then, of course, we have nutrition, um, changing your diet, getting restful sleep, 7 to 9 hours per night recommended by the American Heart Association, and then that stress management. So that could be talk therapy, that could be yoga, meditation, all sorts of different options that you can utilize to reduce your stress. And these, of course, are my 10 citations that I used for writing my paper and the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize, I'm not 100% on my game right now just because I've been so sick the last few days. And cheers to the end of the semester. Thank you.